to see you there. You guys must be here to listen to me talk about temporary panels and temporary lighting as part of our ongoing safe work practices at Power-Tek. Well, I'm always ready to talk about safety, so let's get into it. So as part of this video, we were lucky enough to end up on the baseline site and be able to get some very good footage on our temporary panels as we actually managed to assemble some of them. But that kind of leads me into my first point. While we're lucky enough to be assembling panels for this particular job right now, future jobs may still use those panels. So the first thing when you go to install a panel that you should be doing is checking it for damage, especially if it's an older panel. We also want to make sure as we're installing our panels to keep them away from water sources, specifically water sources above. Water coming from above is going to cause long-term damage on that panel, and we're going to have to get rid of it at some point. Standard code rules apply as well. We got to make sure that we're keeping a 1.5 meter clearance in front and around of our panels, which means no piling up building materials, anything like that, and trying to keep the other trades honest when it comes to that detail. All of your temporary plugs must be GFIs. Now again, we went ahead and we assembled these panels, we made sure they were GFIs. This is more of a concern as you go to replace faulty ones, as these panels go through their service life. We also have to ensure that we have very good grounding on these panels, that we are nice and secure on our ground lugs, because without any other path to ground, there's lots of hazard around for shock, while we're making sure that all of our extension cords are in very good condition. And keep in mind that all these panels have to be inspected by the ESA at some point. Just because it's temporary doesn't mean that you can get away with kind of some of these janky solutions. If anything goes wrong, your panel that you installed to code is going to be what protects you. Just to follow on to that, because now that we employ other trades, I want to reiterate again that there is absolutely no reason why any trade should be going inside one of those panels other than an electrician. So we did get some of these beautiful shots from our site at Baseline this week, breaking down how we went ahead and we built our panels, as well as some of the other details around the site. So to start, we went ahead and we cut down our sheets of plywood down to the size that we were looking for, which in this case was 2 feet by 4 feet. We went ahead and got our panel mounted and started running our plugs with a little bit of EMT. We're just using 1110 boxes that we've knocked out to 3/4 and making sure that we use our GFCI plugs. We're just using 1110 covers here, but we want to make sure that if we are in an area where there could be splashing water, that the alternative is there for us to use bubble covers as well. But that one's setting up one of these panels is fairly straightforward. Alright guys, so we're going to get going and putting this panel together. As you can see, we've already kind of got most of our material here. Our plywood is cut. We've got our first couple of knockouts out, but we're going to step those out. So we're just going to show you some of the layout of what we're going to do here. We're going to be coming out with a 3/4 inch connector into a pull elbow, and then we're going to stack 3 down here like this. Normally you might want to use 1/2 inch because it'd be easier with the 1110 boxes. We're going to use 3/4 here because we've got 3. We're worried about the conduit fill. You always got to keep in mind that just because it's temporary doesn't mean that it doesn't have to meet code. Alright, so first things first, let's go ahead and step these guys out. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and measure out exactly where we want this to sit. So 8 inches from the top. And a clearance of a bare minimum of 4 3/4 on either side. Make sure I've got some washers in behind these screws. Got 4 here. We'll go 1 for 1. Many of you will know, but for the apprentices out there, one thing you always have to remember as you're doing a new panel is to check your bond screw. In this case, because we're not a service entrance, we do not need the bond screw, and so this guy right here that bonds our case to our neutral needs to be removed. Again, just because your panel is temporary does not mean that it does not have to meet code. Our 3 boxes in a row, each one of them is going to get a 20 amp GFCI receptacle. On all of our temporary panels, by policy, they have to be GFCIs. So we're going to be running number 12 between each of these boxes, back into our breakers over here, and then putting our 1110 covers on top as well. Alright guys, so we're pretty much finished here. Everything is already wired up, and I've got covers on this side, but I just wanted to show you my wiring over on this side. So each plug gets its own breaker, gets labels so that everybody knows which one is which, and then we try to make things all nice and neat here, like we've got over here. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and stick these covers on. We'll get them each labeled. We've got our covers on all of our plugs here. We're going to stick this cover on as well. It's not required in this use. It is only required for service entry panels with a main breaker, just to prevent anybody from opening up the panel from being able to touch the main, which can only be turned off by hydro. So in this case though, we're just going to stick it in so that we don't lose it in case this panel gets reused somewhere else. Alright, and the cover's on, we're done, and this is how you go ahead and assemble a temporary panel. Alright, now moving on, we're going to go on temporary lighting as well. Temporary lighting is going to be mostly string lights. The most important thing to consider is to take the time to go ahead and plan your route. There's various reasons why this is important, not the least of which involves making sure that you're not having to move them frequently. This means making sure that you're not stringing them through where walls are going to end up being, where, through steel door frames where they could get pinched, that sort of thing. Making sure that, especially, I'm sure we've all done our extension cords with the knot on the end to make sure we have a strain relief. Doing things like that to make sure that we don't loosen up or damage these string lights over time. Secondly, we want to make sure that we are up out of the way, not running across walkways. No tripping hazards, no overhead hazards, and while our new style of string lights don't involve having the cages, we want to make sure that before we put them up, any of our old style string lights that involve cage and a bulb, we want to make sure that we put those on as well. I also want to mention to resist the urge to treat these string lights like extension cords. As much as they can act as an extension cord, they are not. And if you, say, plug a tool in that overloads the circuit, or for any other reason find yourself tripping the breaker that one of these cords is powered off of, you're not just taking away your own light, but you're potentially taking away light from everybody else on the floor, which on an active job site, lots of tools around and lots of concrete and steel, that is quite a bit of risk. And we really don't want to be using those as extension cords. To go over the last little part of this policy here, I wanted to go over some of the responsibilities of the different parties. First of all is management, and the biggest responsibility for management is already kind of taken care of with this video, is to make sure that they have the policy, they have it in place, they're educating everybody on it, and making sure that everybody's aware, and that they're also making sure that they put the order into supplies with the things that we need to follow the policy. The supervisor is there to be the on-site person to kind of arbiter any decisions with regards to where string lights go or what's needed, as well as to actually make sure that those materials, those string lights, end up going from the office to the actual site and are available to the workers on site. And of course, finally, for the workers, you guys, and myself included, we have to follow the policy, we have to listen to our supervisor's instructions, and we are actually responsible to be the ones who actually physically put up the lights. So we all have responsibilities in here. It's everybody's job to make the site safer, which is why we have the policy in the first place. Alright, and that's all for today. I feel safer already, and I hope you guys do too. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.